Hi friends, Andrew Carruthers here, Education Director for Samvia, and today on the Artist Studio, we want to share with you a pixie, but a very basic layered pixie that you can transition into a billion different options. We really like this shape because it's something that you can put on almost any of your short-haired guests, and all of the little pieces and doodads and details, that's up to you and your guest. But it gives you a basic structure that is really simple, it's very fast, and it's easy to modify. We're going to work with deep point cutting, we're going to work with razor cutting, we're going to walk you through the wet haircut, some dry texturizing and detailing, and some blow drying tips. So, grab a mannequin head, and let's get rolling. After a great consultation, next step is we took Lydia back to the shampoo room, gave her a great shampoo and head massage. Did it feel good? Yeah, of course it did. But we want to start with the hair wet because we are going to be doing some razor cutting on this haircut as well. So we start wet. We did prep the hair first with some Redken 1 United. We really like this, especially when we're razor cutting, because it gives the hair some slip and softness, but it's not going to leave it feeling oily at all. So next, we're going to section her off. We first sectioned here at the vertical transition. This really marks the point between the sides and the top of the head. And the reason that's important is there's a really strong transition here, and the hair on top of the head is going to change and it's going to live a little bit differently on the surface of the head. So we want to make sure we know where that transition happens. From here, the haircut is going to be fairly simple. We're going to start by using shears first. And we're going to give you two examples here because we want you to see the difference between the two. Primarily, when we're cutting these kinds of pixies, we're really looking for something that's very soft and very lived in. So we have a couple choices. We could go in and blunt cut the hair, but when we do that, then we're going to spend a lot of time chipping back into it to retexturize it. So we're addressing that same section twice, which isn't necessarily super efficient for us. So, our suggestion is always, if you don't want a blunt line, don't cut a blunt line. So, the options are then, we can point cut, or we can razor cut. So we're gonna go through those two options. We're gonna start here in center back. We're gonna take a 1-inch vertical section. Now, because this is going to be a very loose, very lived-in kind of haircut, we don't have to get into these microscopic sections that we might want to get into if we're looking for a really precise line. So, there is your 1-inch center section, top to bottom. We want this to follow the head shape really well because with this particular kind of shape, we want a very soft layered effect. And we want to save a lot of the work for the detailing phase. So the very first process that we're going through is primarily just to set up the basic fundamental shape. So we're going to keep it pretty simple. This is very much going to remind you of your 90-degree state board haircut. Length is going to be really important, and it's going to be dictated by hair density, hair texture, and of course the wants and needs of the guest. But if she's got really super thick, coarse hair that likes to jump, going this short could get us into trouble because that might turn into a puffball for her. So we might want to leave just a little bit more length there so we have the ability to control it through the blow dry, or we need to choose lengths that are so short that they don't matter, that they can actually stick out and it's not going to be a big deal. Luckily, our Lydia mannequin head has a beautiful head of medium textured hair that's pretty easy to work with. So we can just go right for the length that we want for the texture that we're looking for. We're going to elevate 90 degrees to the head shape, following the head shape. No over direction. We call that natural over direction because the over direction of this section is into the center of the section. It's not back or forward. And then we want to be really mindful to change the elevation as we walk around the head. So my fingers will go flat to the head shape and then come straight out from the head shape. In the finger angle, what's happening top to bottom, again, is just working parallel to that natural head shape. Flat to the head shape, 90 degrees out from the scalp, and then just point cut your cutting line. We're using the 5.5 inch streamline shear for this. Because it's pretty short hair, we don't need a big, huge, long shear for point cutting, because we're not going crazy deep into the fiber of the hair. We're just introducing just the first maybe 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch of the tip of the shear into the hair. And that's just going to give us a very soft line. So our next section, we're going to take half of our previously cut section, half of the new hair, and those two sections are going to come together in the center of the section. Typically, when we think about a traveling guide, we think about the guide itself staying still and the new hair coming over to it. This will give us over direction, which will build length forward. So we don't want length to build forward here. We want it to stay head shaped. So we're going to take the new piece of hair in the guide, and we're going to bring them together in the center of the section. Again, the elevation is 90 degrees to the natural head shape. So follow that natural head shape. Don't cut straight lines here. We want them to be curved to the head shape. That's one of the things we see pretty often when we're in your salons working with you hands-on, is the tendency to build really strong straight lines because they're easier. But we want these lines to really hug the head shape. So follow that natural head shape. And then it's pretty simple from here. We want to keep the hair damp. So we'll give it a mist with our continuous mist bottle once in a while. You don't need it sopping wet. You just want it to be damp enough that you can control the hair. Control your sections, keep them clean. Elevate to 90 degrees. And again, just introducing that first maybe 1/2 inch to 1/4 inch of the shear into the hair strand for the point cutting. We're not looking for huge peaks and valleys here. The one thing we do want to be careful of is we want to stay fairly parallel to the hair. If we start to take the angle of the shear more at a diagonal to the hair, the challenge that we're going to run into is that it's going to feel like chop, chop, chop. And those lines, as they fall, are going to feel heavy and blocky, so we're going to have to texture those out. So we want to keep the shear fairly parallel to the hair as we're point cutting, and just scan through the section. So we're going to continue in vertical sections, elevate to 90 degrees, and follow the head shape with our finger angle. And then just take each section and over direct it into the center of the section so we're not building length forward. As we start to step in front of the ear, the one thing that we want to pay attention to is, do we want to have some length through the sideburn area? If yes, then very simple adjustment. As we take the section, the top of the section will stay the same. We'll just point cut, 90 degrees elevation, follow the natural head shape. And then as we come down into the hair that's going to form the sideburn, you can just adjust your finger angle and just point cut out longer. You can see them kind of sliding out there. And of course, that's probably more than we want, but we'd much rather have more than we want versus too little. And then same thing on the next section. Top portion of the section, there's my guide. Elevation and finger angle follow the natural head shape. Then as we get down to the bottom, you could even work this way, more with the pinch and talk method, just to leave that length through the sideburn. Now, as we step to the opposite side, let's talk about razor cutting. So we're gonna do one side with the point cut, one side with the razor cut. Of course, we probably wouldn't do that in the salon. Might freak our guests out a little bit. But when we're practicing, these are great things to do because it helps us to see the difference in the process. So if you're working along at home, we would highly recommend to do the same with your mannequin head. Keep things damp. One of the things that's really important when we're razor cutting is definitely keep water in the hair, and that's going to keep the hair from getting roughed up through the razor cutting process. Also, we made sure that we put a fresh blade into the razor. And then the nice thing with our razor is you actually have the rotation, you have the swivel there. So getting the correct angle on the razor is pretty easy. So we'll take our next vertical section, now going right of center. Take a little bit of our previously cut section as a guide. Elevate to 90 degrees, get tons of tension on that hair. You really want to make sure you have lots of pull on the hair because that's part of what's going to allow the razor to cut really cleanly. You'll see the guide drop out there on the opposite side. That's my sign to stop my fingers. And notice that I'm not sliding my fingers out as I work through the hair. That's a habit that we tend to have. We'll kind of chase our fingers. So with a haircut like this, we don't want to chase the fingers because that's going to leave us too much length at the perimeter. So we get our tension, get our section really tight into our fingers, make sure we have tension and the right angle on the razor. Now, the one thing that I personally really tend to like when I'm working with a razor on is shorter haircuts is that I feel like it moves very quickly. The point cutting can be somewhat tedious. It can take a long time. Sometimes we want that level of control. Other times, we just want the efficiency of the razor because the razor is really good. There's the guide. The razor is really good at creating that texture and removing the length of the hair quite quickly. And you can adjust the stroke of the razor. You can do big, long strokes, and that's going to give you much, much deeper texture. Or if you don't want to take too much density from the inside, you can take shorter strokes, which is still going to give you a soft edge, but leave a little bit more density to it. Again, if you're practicing on your mannequin head as you're watching this, go ahead and try different lengths of stroke too, so that you can see the difference that each different kind of stroke creates. Here's your next section. Take a little bit of that previously cut guide as our guide. Nice tight tension, elevate to 90 to the head shape. Let the guide drop out the back of the fingers. And razor cut to the shape of the head. So everything has stayed the same side to side, really just the tool has changed, and the tool requires us to cut on the back side of our hands so that we keep the tension. Other than that, everything is the exact same, friends. So I'm just going to continue along the right side, still in vertical sections, 90 elevation, and that natural over direction so we don't build length forward. And this last section, again, we want to make sure that we leave that little bit of length down here at the perimeter. So we'll take that section. The top portion of the section will work the exact same. Nice tight tension. Make sure we're starting high enough with our elevation. Then as we pick up this little sideburn area, now we can chase the fingers a little bit and leave that length towards the outside. Now it's not necessarily that, again, we want that much length to it, but we're going to leave it there so that we have a refinement. So next step, we're headed to the top. Okay, once you've completed the sides and back, now it's time to get up here into the top. So we are going to grab the shears again, but actually before we do that, let's dampen her down because it's been long enough in this parting that the parting is going to want to stay. So re-dampen right around the parting. Make sure you loosen that back up. And then we're going to create a new parting. And this is going to set up the top of the haircut. Doesn't have to be sopping wet, just damp enough that we can control the hair. And one of the things that we're noticing currently is that the point that hair is kind of distributing itself from isn't necessarily the high point of the head. We used to always tell people to come to the high point of the head and then take a section to the top of the ear. But this hair behind the high point isn't necessarily the back of this haircut. Where we're seeing a lot of people base the movement from their haircuts lately is that they're basing it out of the crown. So that's what we're going to do as well. We're actually going to move more into the crown area, and we're going to create a parting diagonal forward from the crown, just going towards the back of the ear. So we'll create that on both sides. So you can see it comes from the center of the crown to the top of the ear or just behind the ear. From there, we're going to take pie-shaped sections from the center point of that division line, and we're going to continue the exact same process. So there's that pie-shaped section. We'll pick up the 5.5-inch streamline shear again, because we just don't need a huge shear at this point to do this technique. If we were doing really long hair and we were trying to really deeply point cut into it to get tons of texture, then maybe we'd step up to the 6.25 inch. Or if we're really trying to get crazy, maybe we'd go to the 6.75 inch. Maybe even the 7-inch dry cutting shear. Okay, so now the head shape's going this way, 90 degrees to that head shape. You can see I've switched to cutting the over top of the fingers, and that's just about body position and ergonomics. It's more challenging once we get up on top to stay in a palm-to-palm position. If this feels natural and you feel like you can maintain good ergonomic position, this isn't bad by any means. It's just that for most of us, we're gonna find that standing here is gonna feel a lot more comfortable. There's the guide from underneath. We're gonna go ahead and just notch, not notch, stand through with just some soft point cutting. Again, it's not a huge deep point cut. We're just introducing maybe the first 1/4 inch of the tip of the shear into the hair. We're gonna take, again, from the high point of the head, or sorry, not the high point of the head, the high point of our section area that we're in, and we're just gonna pie shape off of that. You might call this a pie-shaped section, you might call it a radial section. The most important thing about this type of sectioning is that the hair from this point goes like this. It kind of radiates out from that point. So we don't want to move this way with vertical sections because in essence, we're actually going to end up in more of a diagonal section in relationship to how the hair naturally falls. So By taking those diagonal they look diagonal. By taking these pie shape or radial sections, we end up staying more vertical with how the hair naturally wants to fall. Take just a little previous hair as the guide, and again, we're not over directing back to that previously cut section. What we want to do is we want to take both sides of the section into the center of the section, and that way we're not going to over direct back and create length towards the face. Take one more section, always coming to that center point of the division line that we created from the center of the crown to the top of the ear. Take just a bit of that previously cut section as a guide, comb everything cleanly back out of the way. Really important here to stay clean with our sections. Each side of the section comes into the center point of the section. And then softly point cut. If the hair is getting in your way, go ahead and just give it a quick clip off if her hair is long enough that it's starting to wrap around your fingers. And then again, just stay very parallel to the hair. Look at the position of my arm. My palm is facing more out away from me, so that's much easier to get the tips of the shears to go inward. If the palm is more towards the floor, it puts my wrist in a really bad position to try and get this point cut, which we see very, very often. So most of the time, if people are in this position, they drop their elbow and create a lot of choppiness in the haircut. So we would suggest that if you're point cutting on the top of the head like this, that you're staying parallel. If you're staying parallel, that your palm will be facing more outward. So same exact thing happens on the opposite side of the head. So we're just going to jump to the opposite side of the head and continue in pie-shaped sections. 90 degrees elevation to the head shape. Over direction is natural into the center of the section. Finger angle is following the natural head shape. And the point cut is going to be very parallel to the hair strand. Now that we've reached our division line from the crown to the top of the ear, this hair on top is going to kind of move all over the place. So here we can just go back to more of a typical vertical type of a section, just to make it easy. But the process is going to stay the exact same. Still 90 degrees to the head shape, and over direction, or what we like to call natural over direction, which means both sides of the section are being over directed into the center. Elevation is going to stay 90 degrees to the head shape, and we're going to continue that soft point cut. If you want even more visual texture, you could definitely get more aggressive with this point cutting technique, but the thing you want to do is just make sure that you're staying very parallel to the grain of the hair. If you get too diagonal to the grain of the hair, it's just going to appear choppy, especially on this short of hair. You can kind of get away with that when the hair gets a little more medium length, longer, but on shorter hair, if you put those chops in, they can kind of show up as kind of blocky looking. If the hair is a little more fine, you can get away with being a little bit more dramatic with those peaks and valleys because it needs to be more dramatic so that they show up. If you get too parallel with the hair on very super fine hair, what you'll find is the hair will look just kind of wispy on you. So there's that section. Make sure in this particular section, guys, that you're following that natural head shape because it's easy to take this section and do this with it. But what you'll notice is the top of this section is not 90 degrees to the head shape. It's actually more parallel to the floor, and it's a very low elevation. So a lot of times we'll grab all that hair, we'll be here, and we'll cut there. Well, that's going to leave you weight at the top of your section, which in this particular shape we don't want. So make sure that you're paying attention to that natural head shape through this corner and continuing to move the elevation in accordance to the natural head shape. Once we get to about the top of the ear, we do want to maybe save a little bit of length as we move forward because we might want to cut a little bit longer fringe on this. This particular mannequin head is, it's a pretty typical guest. We get to this point and we realize, well, we already have a fringe cut in there. So we want to preserve as much of that length as possible so that we have something to work with when we go back in to cut the fringe area. So now, on top of the ear, we'll create a stationary guide and just over-direct everything back to that. And don't worry that it might become slightly detached or disconnected there. That's going to be just fine. So we'll take that vertical section, over-direct back to the stationary guide over top of the ear now. But the cutting line and the elevation is going to stay the same. So from here, I'm just going to continue in those vertical sections, moving forward towards the face, over-directing back to that stationary guide. As we start on the opposite side, nothing really changes here. We're going to continue to work in those vertical sections until we get to the top of the ear. The over-direction is that natural over-direction we were talking about, where both sides of the section come into the center of the section, point cutting to the shape of the head. Once we hit the top of the ear, again, we'll set a stationary guide there, and everything's going to get over-directed back to that stationary guide of the ear. So I'm going to continue on. All right, let's get into the blow dry now that we're finished all of the cutting for the wet portion of the haircut. And one thing, resist the temptation to over detail the hair yet. We want to now get it into more of the form that she's actually going to wear her hair in. So make sure that in this form, we're getting the basic shape. Save your refinements for after the blow dry. Now, we're going to use kind of a different product here. This is the Curvaceous Wind Up. This is Redken's product that helps to activate and texturize curl. What we've discovered is, especially on these shorter shapes where we want some texture and movement, this is fantastic for blow drying these shapes. So we'll give it a little shake, and we're just gonna lightly mist it through. We're not gonna put tons of product in the hair. We just wanna start to create a foundation for our blow dry. And we definitely believe in layering product into the hair. So we're going to layer this first, and then of course there'll be some products that we use on top of it after it's dry. We're going to grab the Artist Series blow dryer, and we're going to turn the ions on because we do want polish to the hair. We're going to go on medium airflow and medium speed. When we hit this point, the next phase is to just go through and put all the detailing into the haircut. So one of the first things we want to look at here is the perimeter shape, the exterior shape of the haircut. So we're going to grab the Signature Series reversible blending shear. When we put so much time and effort in to create softness within this haircut, the last thing we want to do is go in and jam some big, heavy, hard lines into this. Well, I don't know, maybe you would. Maybe you'd like to do that for some contrast, but not for this particular haircut. So by using the reversible blending shear, as we refine our lengths, and really this is a practice all about taste, as we refine the lengths, by using the blending shear, it'll keep those edges really soft because we used the point cutting technique and the razor with a specific purpose, and that was to create movement and texture within this haircut. So we don't want to put the blunt lines back in. One of the things you'll want to look at as you're looking at things happening on the face shape is where do we want the eye to go to? Because do we want the jawline to be a focus, or do we want to keep it off of the jawline because maybe she has a really strong jawline? So it might be something that you want this to drape just past or sit above, because when it hits right on it, it's really going to point to it and say, hey, check this out, look at this. So make sure that wherever your points are sitting as far as lengths are concerned, they're sitting on things that you're trying to draw attention to, specifically things like cheekbones and eyes, or if she has a great jawline. So we like this around the cheekbones, so we'll keep that around the cheekbone. As we come around the sides, again, what happens around the ear and around the back hairline, all of that is really about personal taste, and that's an agreement that you need to make with the guest in the salon. We would suggest working as much as possible to the natural movements in her hairline, because a lot of times what we'll do is we'll see these wacky things in the hairline and we'll cut in contrast to them. So let's say this wants to kind of kick forward, we'll try and cut that off, but maybe that's what we should keep because that's where it wants to go. And then right here, actually create some space so that it allows that piece to really stand out and shine. So try and work along with the shape of the natural hairline, and she's gonna have a much easier time styling it if you actually give her something that she doesn't have to work against. So the reversible blending shear, because the teeth are a little tighter together than the Invisalign shear, we're going to take more hair with each cut. So this is probably a little better shear to use for this refinement point than the Invisalign shear that we have. And for those of you that don't have either, you want to choose the blending shear that you have that is going to remove more length faster, so that you're not wasting a lot of time continually going back in and cutting and cutting and cutting. And, you know, of course, don't cut their ear off either. Then, once we have perimeter fairly well set, you know, I actually really like this fringe, so I think we're going to keep it. The one thing that I'm not liking is that it feels a little detached from the texture above. So we're going to grab the Artist Series slide cutting shear now. And what this shear is really fantastic at is cutting it in motion through the hair. Because of the shape of the blade and the design of the blade, it allows the hair to slip and push slightly. So we're not just dragging it through the hair with the shear open, we're closing the shear as we cut, and the hair is allowed to just slip and push and pull and not pull as we cut. A lot of times if you do this with a regular shear, what you're gonna end up with is the shear will catch the hair and it'll just make it feel a little more just harder. Is going to grab the hair and cut more cleanly, so it's not going to feel as soft. So the real benefit of this shear is the softness and the touch and the feel as we're cutting. If you need to take more hair away, you just create a little bit of tension with your fingers, and that will allow you to take more hair away. So what we're doing is we're creating some connection points between the shortest pieces of the layers here and then the longest pieces of the fringe, because we have all this texture and movement here, but then it gets really blocky looking through there. So right there is where we see that texture end. Place the blending shear, this slide cutting shear in right where you start to see that detach, and then blend through. And you're cutting in motion, so we're not camping out in one spot. We're allowing the shear to move as we close. And that allows the hair to push forward. With any shear, one of the principles of cutting in motion like this is that the more parallel you are with the hair strand, the softer things are going to be. It's going to be more like a point cut technique. Whereas the more diagonal you go across the hair, if we come in this way across the hair, we're going to take more pieces out. So the more parallel we are, the softer it's going to be, almost more like a blending shear. And the more that we come across the hair, at more of a diagonal to the hair strand, then we're going to create more pieces. And that's starting to feel more in balance with the overall shape of the haircut. So now let's address any kind of texture we need through here. Hopefully there's not a lot of detailing that needs to be done throughout the rest of the haircut, because you've worked so hard in the haircut to build the texture as you removed the length. And as we look through, I feel really good about it for the most part. There's quite a bit of texture and movement in the hair, and the product choice and the way that we blow dried really supports that. But one thing that I see that I would like to see collapse a little bit is just through here, just above the neckline. It feels just a little bit dense right there, which is pretty common. So we're going to ask her to tilt her head downward just slightly. And then again, we're going to do some cutting in motion. So comb the hair so that there's no tangles. And the blade of the shear comes in fairly parallel. And we're just going to take some weight out right through that area so that we can collapse it down slightly. We're not trying to take tons of hair. You could also do this with a blending shear. And as you work, just do a bit and then comb it through. Remember, you can always take more hair out, but once too much is gone, well, then you have a little bit of a problem, don't you? And again, you could do this with a regular shear. The slide cutting shear just keeps it much, much softer as you do this. If you do this with a regular shear, you're going to notice you're just going to take a lot more hair away with each cut, and you might end up having to do more of a talking motion with the shear, where it's more of a wiggle of the shear as you come through the hair. That's starting to look a little bit better to my taste. And again, what we're really looking for there was just to create a little bit more head shape there. It was looking just a little flat and a little blocky. From there, really everything else is just about personal taste as far as where you take this with your detailing and texturizing. So first work through perimeter, then through the fringe, then start to look at your texture and balance. Okay, final step. We now need to add a little bit of product to just finish it off. We're going to use the Redken Triple Dry 15. It's a great hairspray for this kind of work because it's going to stay really dry. It's not going to look producty at all. It's going to keep it looking more natural. Love the finish of this, especially right now. We're just not seeing a lot of real high shine, waxy sort of finishes. We see these drier, almost dusty sort of feeling in the hair. And so the triple dry is kind of the perfect product for that. You most definitely could work with a little bit more of a pomade or a wax or a clay, which would be great. But like I said, I'm just kind of enjoying these drier finishes lately. All right, let's give her one last spin, make sure we're liking the 360. Hand her a mirror so she can look at the back. And I think we're just about there. So let's do a quick recap for you. When we're working on these short shapes, when we're working on any shape really, we want to make sure that our sections are setting us up for success. So that first section that showed us that change in direction from the sides to the top is really important. We call that the vertical transition. Some of you might call it the bridal ridge, which is totally fine. We just call it the vertical transition because it's the transition vertically on the head from the sides and back to the top. Within that then, we're going to take a 1-inch vertical section down the center. Elevation is 90 degrees to the head shape. Finger angle is also following the head shape. And the over direction is what we call natural. You might refer to it as no over direction. Again, it doesn't really matter what you call it. The idea is to not go length forward or backward. The two sides of the section are meeting in the center of the section. Try the point cut, try the razor cutting. Make sure you try different stroke lengths, different point cut angles and depths so that you can see the difference in the technique. One of the things that we really feel is important is as you're practicing that you're kind of exploring so that you can see what different techniques do. So we did point cut on this side, razor cut on this side. Really the only difference is once you get over the top of the ear, as you come forward here to the sideburn area, if you want to have that little extra bit of length, make sure you change the finger angle in a way that supports that and leaves you the length that you need to play around with that sideburn area. As we go into the top, remember that the distribution of the hair on top of the head is changing lately. We're not taking it from the high point and combing it back into the crown. Really what we're seeing is this, where the crown is kind of this area that everything radiates out from. So instead of parting from the high point of the head to the top of the ear, why not part from the center of the crown where it radiates from towards the back of the ear? That way it kind of separates out and shows you where most of the hair is going to live in the crown. We took pie-shaped sections all the way through that, following the same elevation, same over direction, same finger angle, then switched to more of a vertical section as we come across the top. Once we get to the top of the ear so that we can save the length in the front, we established a stationary guide. Everything gets over directed back to that. Follow the guide. Pretty simple. So we hope you enjoyed the haircut. This is something that has so much versatility to it. Think of all the options you have from this point on where you can take this haircut. And that's why we like to keep it so simple and so basic, so that way you can decide where do you want to take it from here and what options you can create for your guests. So if you have any questions, please reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you guys. Hope you enjoyed the haircut. We'll see you next time on The Artist Studio.